We heard you moved into a penthouse. We want to make things right. Those were the words my son Zephyr and my daughter-in-law Xanthi said as they stood at my door 6 months after throwing me out like garbage. 6 months of hell, 6 months of humiliation, 6 months of wondering if the people I loved most in this world had ever loved me at all. But what they saw when they stepped inside my new home left them frozen. I'm Quintessa Ashbury. I'm 66 years old, and I never imagined my own family would betray me in such a cruel way. But more than that, I never imagined I had the strength to rise from the ashes they left me in. This is my story. It all started the day my husband Theodore died. 2 years ago, on a Tuesday morning that began like any other, Theodore collapsed in our garden while pruning the roses. He always said those roses were his meditation, his way of talking to God. I suppose God answered that day because by the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. Massive stroke. The doctor said he didn't suffer, but I did. For 45 years, I had been Theodore's wife, the art teacher who gave up her career to raise our son, the woman who turned our Victorian house in Queen Anne into a home filled with love and laughter, the wife who never said no when Theodore needed me, never complained when money was tight, never questioned the life we built together. When Theodore died, I didn't just lose my husband. I lost my compass. The house where we'd created our life together became a museum of memories I could barely stand to walk through. There was the kitchen table where Theodore read the morning paper while I graded my students' artwork. There was the armchair where he held me during our favorite Sunday ritual, old movies, and homemade popcorn. In the corner stood my easel, dusty and untouched, holding a canvas I'd started 20 years ago and never finished. In those first months, Zephyr and Xanthi still visited. They brought casseroles I couldn't eat and sympathy I didn't want. They promised I'd never be alone. "We're family, Mom," Zephyr said, hugging me at Theodore's funeral. His voice was thick with tears. "We'll always be here for you." I believed him. What a fool I was. The visits became less frequent, the phone calls shorter. Whenever I called, Xanthi would answer with that clipped, impatient tone she reserved for interruptions. "Quintessa, we're busy. Can we call you back?" They never did. I told myself they were dealing with their own grief. Zephyr had lost his father. They were young, building their lives. I shouldn't be a burden. That word, burden, I didn't know then how much it would come to define me in their eyes. 6 months ago, on a gray March afternoon, everything shattered. They arrived unannounced. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard the car pull up. My heart lifted. Maybe they'd come for one of our old Sunday dinners. Maybe we could be a family again. But when I opened this door, the people standing there weren't the son and daughter-in-law I remembered. Xanthi wore a designer dress I'd never seen before, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves. She looked at me the way you'd look at something unpleasant you'd found on the bottom of your shoe. Zephyr stood behind her, holding a manila folder, his jaw tight and his eyes refusing to meet mine. "Mom," Zephyr said, his voice flat, "we need to talk." No hug, no greeting, just those 4 cold words. "Of course, honey, come in. I'll make coffee." "We're not staying long," Xanthi interrupted. She walked past me into the living room like she owned the place. In a way, I suppose she thought she did. I followed them, my hands trembling. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. They sat on the sofa, my sofa, the one Theodore and I had picked out together 30 years ago, and looked at me like I was a stranger. "Mom, there's no easy way to say this," Zephyr began, still not looking at me. "Xanthi is pregnant. We need more space." My heart should have soared. A grandchild. But the way he said it, the coldness in the words, turned my joy to ice. "That's wonderful news," I managed. "I can help with the baby. I can babysit or—" "This house is too big for one person," Xanthi cut in. Her voice was smooth as glass and just as sharp. "You're living here alone in 4 bedrooms while we're crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment. It doesn't make sense." I stared at her, not understanding. "What are you saying?" Zephyr finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes broke something inside me. There was no warmth there, no love, just necessity. You need to move out, Mom. We're moving in here. The world tilted. This is my home, I whispered. I lived here with your father for 45 years. Every memory of our life together is in these walls. Memories don't pay the bills, Zephyr said, his voice hardening. Besides, Dad put my name on the deed years ago. Legally, I have just as much right to this house as you do. He said it like he'd been practicing, like he'd rehearsed this moment. But this is all I have left of him, I pleaded. My voice was shaking now, tears starting to blur my vision. Please, Zephyr, I'm your mother. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. Xanthi actually laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound that echoed in the sudden silence. Enough with the martyr act, Quintessa. You've been playing the victim your whole life. Theodore knew it too. He just didn't have the courage to say it. That line, trampling on my dead husband's memory, it was like a knife straight through my heart. You have 1 week to pack, Zephyr said, standing up. He dropped the folder on the coffee table. After that, we're changing the locks. 1 week? I was on my feet now, my voice rising in desperation. Where am I supposed to go? I don't have enough money to rent a decent place on my pension. Xanthi stroked her still flat belly with theatrical tenderness. That's not our problem. Our baby needs a stable home. And just like that, they left. I stood in my living room, my home, and collapsed onto the floor. For 45 years, I had given everything to this family. I'd stayed up nights when Zephyr was sick. I'd worked extra hours tutoring students to help pay for their wedding. I'd been their safety net every time they had problems. This was how they repaid me, like trash to be discarded. The next week passed in a blur of grief and disbelief. I packed my life into cardboard boxes, 45 years of marriage reduced to 6 containers, photo albums, my mother's dishes, a few worn dresses, the cookbooks filled with Theodore's notes in the margins. On moving day, they didn't even show up. I left the keys on the kitchen table with a note that said simply, "Be happy." I wasn't. The taxi took me and my 6 boxes to the only place I could afford, the Evergreen Motel in Capitol Hill. The name was ironic. There was nothing evergreen about it except maybe the mold growing in the corners. The room was tiny, stained wallpaper, a window that looked out onto a dumpster alley. The bed creaked every time I breathed. The bathroom was shared with 5 other tenants, and at night, the walls were thin enough that I could hear every fight, every drunk stumbling home, every moment of other people's lives that weren't mine. This was my new home, my reward for a lifetime of devotion. In those first days, I couldn't eat. I'd lie on that sagging bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, trying to understand what had happened. When had my son become capable of such cruelty? What had I done wrong in raising him? I called. Over and over, I called. Zephyr's phone would ring twice, maybe 3 times, then go to voicemail. "Hi, honey, it's Mom. Just wanted to see how you're doing. Call me when you can." He never did. I texted Xanthi, swallowing my pride, to ask about the pregnancy. "Xanthi, I know things are difficult, but I'm going to be this baby's grandmother. Please let me know how you're feeling." Her reply came hours later. "Stop bothering us. We don't want anything to do with you." The weeks became a routine of survival. Every morning, I'd walk the neighborhood with a folder of my old teaching credentials, looking for work, art tutoring, elder care, anything. "You're overqualified," they'd say at the tutoring centers. "You're too old," they'd say at the care facilities. At 66, I was too much of everything and not enough of anything. I tried the Seattle Community Arts Center, the place where I'd once dreamed of teaching. The director, Harriet Donovan, was a kind woman in her 50s with sympathetic eyes. "Mrs. Ashbury, I remember you," she said, looking over my resume. "You taught at Roosevelt High for 20 years. 23, I corrected softly. "Your credentials are impressive." She paused, and I knew what was coming. "But we need someone younger, someone with more energy for the kids." I wanted to tell her I had energy. I wanted to tell her I'd spent 2 decades inspiring teenagers to see the world through art. I wanted to tell her that my own son used to draw the most beautiful pictures, that he'd once drawn our family as superheroes with me wearing a cape and crown. Instead, I just nodded and left. I bought the cheapest food I could find. Day-old bread from the discount rack, dented cans of tuna, bruised apples the stores were throwing away. Some days, I ate only once to make my meager savings last. After 2 months, I'd lost 15 pounds. My clothes hung loose. My face looked gaunt and gray. No one cared. Month 2 brought a new humiliation. I was at Whole Foods, not shopping, just walking through, because it was warm and smelled like the life I used to have. That's when I saw her. Xanthi. She was in the organic produce section, her belly now prominently round, wearing an expensive maternity dress I knew cost more than my monthly motel rent. Her cart was full of things I could only dream of affording: fresh salmon, artisanal cheese, imported olive oil. I was wearing a stained coat I'd found at Goodwill, my hair unwashed because the motel shower had been broken for 3 days. "Quintessa!" Her voice rang out across the store, and several people turned to look. I wanted to disappear. "Oh my goodness, you look different." She glided over, all fake concern and sugar-sweet poison. "Are you losing weight? That's so trendy right now." A woman nearby gave me a pitying look. "How are you, Xanthi?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "We're wonderful. The baby is growing perfectly. We just finished redecorating the nursery, your old sewing room. It's magnificent." She paused, then lowered her voice in mock sympathy. "Do you need help? I could spare maybe $50? She pulled out her wallet slowly, deliberately, so everyone could see her charity to this pathetic old woman. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her what she'd done to me. Instead, I shook my head. "I'm fine." "Well, if you're sure?" She tucked her wallet away with visible relief. "Take care of yourself, okay?" She walked away, and I stood there among the organic vegetables, my hands shaking, my heart breaking all over again. When I got back to the motel that night, I looked at myself in the cracked bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Hollow eyes, gray skin, defeat in every line. And for the first time since Theodore died, I cried. Really cried. Month 4 brought me to my knees, literally. I fainted at the pharmacy while trying to buy aspirin for the headaches that never stopped. The pharmacist, a gentle black man in his 60s named Wayne Patterson, helped me to a chair. "Ma'am, when's the last time you ate?" I couldn't remember. Wayne went to the store next door and came back with a turkey sandwich and orange juice. He sat with me while I ate, not saying anything, just being kind. "I lost my wife last year," he finally said. "Cancer. I know what it's like to feel like there's no point in taking care of yourself anymore." I looked at him, this stranger who was showing me more compassion than my own son. "I don't know who I'm living for anymore," I whispered. Wayne was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that stayed with me. "Live for the woman you're supposed to become, not the woman other people made you." That night, I sat on my motel bed, Wayne's words echoing in my head. I was packing to move somewhere even cheaper. I couldn't afford even this terrible room much longer. At the bottom of one of my boxes, wrapped in old newspaper, I found something I'd forgotten. A small package Theodore had given me the week before he died. "Don't open it yet," he'd said with that mysterious smile of his. "Wait until you really need it." I'd been so caught up in grief, I'd packed it away unopened. My hands shook as I tore the paper. Inside was a USB drive and a letter in Theodore's familiar handwriting. I sat down, my heart pounding, and began to read. "My dearest Quintessa, if you're reading this, I'm watching you from somewhere I hope is beautiful. You always said I was too practical, too focused on security instead of living. You were right, as you always were, but my practicality was always for you. In 1978, I bought land outside Seattle with money from my first architecture project. 12 parcels of nothing but forest and dreams. I never told you because I was ashamed it took so long to prove their worth. I wanted to give you everything immediately, the way you gave me everything, your art career, your dreams, your limitless love. But life had other plans. Those worthless plots now sit beneath tech campuses, luxury developments, the new Seattle. The USB has all the documentation. The key to safety deposit box number 1247 at First Puget Bank is taped behind our wedding photo, the one of us at Pike Place Market, remember? When you said yes to a nervous architecture student who promised you the world? Quintessa, you spent 45 years making me feel like a king in a modest castle. Now it's your turn to be queen of your own empire. One last thing, my love. If our son ever treats you poorly, if he forgets the mother who taught him to see beauty in everything, remember this. You taught him to draw. You taught him to dream. If he's forgotten that, he's forgotten himself. Forgive him if you can, but never forget your own worth. Forever yours, Theodore P.S. There's a folder on the USB called For My Warrior. Open it when you're ready to fight. I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands, tears streaming down my face. Theodore, my beautiful, practical Theodore. He'd been protecting me even after death. I found the wedding photo I'd kept among my few belongings. Taped to the back, just as he'd said, was a small gold key. With shaking hands, I opened Theodore's old laptop, one of the few things I'd managed to keep, and plugged in the USB. Folder after folder appeared. Deeds, surveys, maps, photos of empty land taken decades ago. And there, at the bottom, the folder, For My Warrior. I clicked it open. Inside was a single PDF, a property appraisal dated 3 months before Theodore died. Total estimated value of Ashbury Holdings, $3,200,000. $3.2 million. I stared at the number until it blurred. Then I looked around my motel room, the stained walls, the broken furniture, the window looking out on garbage. I'd been living like this, starving, humiliated, broken, while an entire fortune waited for me. But more than the money, more than the zeros on a screen, was what it meant. Freedom, power, choice. For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. I felt anger. Clean, burning anger. They had calculated every step. They had played me like a fool. They had bet on my weakness, my age, my grief. They had bet wrong. I opened my laptop and began to type into Google, Real Estate Attorneys Seattle. Outside, Seattle rain hammered against the window. Inside, something new was being born. The woman they'd thrown away was gone. The woman who would rise. She was just beginning. The next morning, I walked into First Puget Bank like a different person. Not in appearance. I still wore my thrift store coat, still had gray roots showing in my unwashed hair. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. The woman who'd fainted in a pharmacy was gone. In her place stood someone who just discovered she had teeth. The young teller looked at me with barely concealed pity when I approached. I was used to that look by now. I need access to safety deposit box number 1247, I said, sliding the key and my ID across the counter. He checked his computer and his expression changed. Mrs. Ashbury, this box hasn't been opened in over 2 years. Are you sure? I'm sure. He led me to a private room. Inside the box was exactly what Theodore had promised. Stacks of documents, deeds, surveys, and one more envelope labeled, For My Warrior, when you discover who you really are. My hands were steadier now as I opened it. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000, dated the week before Theodore died, and a note, for immediate expenses. Don't wait. Start living. I sat in that small bank room and made a decision. No more waiting. No more being the victim. If Zephyr and Xanthi had taught me anything, it was that kindness without boundaries is just weakness in disguise. It was time to set some boundaries. My first call was to Jameson Rivers. I'd found his name through a Google search for real estate attorney Seattle, but what made me choose him was the quote on his website. "I've been where you are. Someone tried to take what was mine. I fought back. Let me help you do the same." His office was modest, tucked above a coffee shop in Pioneer Square. Jameson himself was a black man in his mid-40s with kind eyes that had seen too much and a firm handshake that said he wouldn't back down. "Mrs. Ashbury," he said, gesturing to a worn leather chair, "tell me everything." So I did, all of it, the betrayal, the motel, the months of hunger and humiliation, and finally, Theodore's gift. When I finished, Jameson was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Ashbury," he finally said, "I'll be direct with you. You have leverage most people only dream of. The question is, what do you want, revenge or peace?" I thought about that, really thought about it. "I want justice," I said slowly, "and I want them to understand what they did, not just to me, to themselves, to what family is supposed to mean." Jameson smiled. "Then let's get to work." Over the next 3 weeks, we moved fast. Jameson formed Harbor Futures LLC, with him as the registered agent. Through the company, we sold 6 of Theodore's 12 parcels to developers who'd been circling them for years. The timing was perfect. Seattle's tech boom had made the land worth even more than Theodore's last appraisal. In 5 weeks, we had $1.8 million in cash. The remaining 6 parcels we kept as long-term investments. "Now what?" Jameson asked. "Now I remember who I used to be." I didn't just change my appearance. I reclaimed it. The first thing I did was leave the Evergreen Motel. I checked into the Extended Stay America downtown. Nothing fancy, but clean, with a working shower and windows that didn't overlook garbage. The woman at the front desk smiled at me like I was a real person, not a ghost. That small kindness made me cry. The second thing I did was find my way back to art. I'd walked past the Seattle Art Museum 100 times during my dark months, never going in because the admission fee seemed like an impossible luxury. Now I walked through those doors and signed up for Nora Fitzgerald's intermediate painting class. Nora was a woman in her 50s with paint-stained fingers and a way of seeing straight through people. "You're holding your brush like you're asking permission," she said the first day, watching me hesitate over a blank canvas. "I haven't painted in 30 years, I admitted. "Then stop asking permission from the past. This is your canvas. Paint your truth." I started with gray, all the shades of pain I'd been living in. Then slowly, gold began to appear. Not bright, shining gold, but the deep, warm gold of sunrise after the longest night. I called it rebirth in gray and gold. When it was finished, Nora stood in front of it for a full minute. "This," she said quietly, "is the work of someone who's survived something terrible and come out the other side. Don't stop painting, Quintessa. The world needs to see this." My third transformation was physical. I went to Jean Juarez's salon in downtown Seattle and told the stylist, "Make me look like myself again." She cut my hair into a modern silver bob, colored away the gray into a deliberate, elegant platinum. She showed me how to care for skin I'd neglected for months. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I'd forgotten existed. Not young, not trying to be, but dignified, present, alive. I bought new clothes at Nordstrom, not expensive designer pieces, but quality basics in neutral colors that made me feel put together. A good coat, comfortable shoes that didn't hurt, simple jewelry. The woman looking back at me in the fitting room mirror wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just herself. That was enough. But I wasn't just rebuilding myself. I was building something else too. "I need information," I told Jameson one afternoon in his office, "about Zephyr and Xanthi. Everything. Finances, jobs, debts, weaknesses." He raised an eyebrow. "You want me to hire an investigator? I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with." "Mrs. Ashbury, are you sure about this path? Once you start—" "I'm sure." He nodded and made a call. 2 days later, I met Dakota Myers. Dakota was a private investigator in her late 30s, a former cop who'd left the force after witnessing one too many injustices the system couldn't fix. She had sharp eyes and sharper instincts. "What do you need?" she asked, direct and to the point. "The truth about my son and his wife." Dakota's first report came within a week, and it was worse than I'd imagined. We met at a quiet cafe in Fremont. She slid a folder across the table. "Your son has a gambling problem," she said without preamble. "Underground poker games in Belltown. He's in debt to a loan shark named Gerald Murphy. They call him Big G. Amount owed, $85,000. My hand shook as I opened the folder. Inside were photos of Zephyr entering seedy clubs, receipts from pawn shops where he'd sold his design equipment, bank statements showing cash withdrawals at 2 a.m. "The house, your old house, he took out a second mortgage within a month of moving in," Dakota continued. "He's 4 payments behind. Total overdue, $18,800. The bank's starting foreclosure proceedings." "4 months," I whispered. "They've only been there 4 months." "It gets worse." Dakota pulled out more papers. Xanthi's background: father is Montgomery Harrington III, Seattle real estate developer. Family worth approximately $50 million. Then why? She was disinherited, cut off completely when she married Zephyr. Her father called it marrying beneath her station. I stared at the photo of Montgomery Harrington, a cold-eyed man in an expensive suit. She gave up $50 million to marry my son, and she's never forgiven him for it. Dakota's expression was grim. Neighbors report hearing them fight almost every night. The walls are thin. Mrs. Benita Alvarez, your old neighbor, says Xanthi screams things like, "Your pathetic mother gave you nothing, and my father was right about you." My heart broke a little more. This was what my son had become, what his marriage had become. "There's one more thing," Dakota said carefully, "about the pregnancy." Something in her tone made me look up sharply. "What about it?" "I'm still confirming, but there are inconsistencies. Medical appointments that don't match up. A name that keeps appearing, Lily Preston, a medical student at UW. I'm looking into it." I sat in my extended stay room that night, Dakota's folder open on the bed, trying to reconcile the son I'd raised with the man in these photos. I'd taught Zephyr to draw when he was 5. He'd been so proud of his first sketch, our family as superheroes. He'd drawn me with a cape and a crown, written in crayon, "Mom is the strongest." When had that boy disappeared? When had he become someone who gambled away his future, who threw his mother into the street to hide his shame? But I also saw something else in those reports. Desperation, fear, a man drowning and pulling everyone down with him. Part of me, the mother part that never completely dies, wanted to save him. The other part, the part that had survived 4 months of hell, knew that sometimes people need to drown before they learn to swim. "I want to buy the house," I told Jameson the next day. He looked up from his notes. "The mortgage on your old house?" "Yes. Through Harbor Futures, LLC. I want to become their creditor." "That's cold, Mrs. Ashbury. That's strategic." I met his eyes. They need to understand that actions have consequences, that the woman they threw away is now the one who holds their fate. Jameson was quiet for a moment. "This is a point of no return. Once you own that debt, you're in a position of complete power over them. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the motel room, the fainting, Xanthi's fake sympathy in Whole Foods, Zephyr's cold eyes when he'd handed me that folder. "I'm prepared." "All right then." He opened his laptop. "Let's make you a creditor." It took 2 weeks, but Jameson worked his magic. Through Harbor Futures, LLC, we purchased the mortgage from the bank at a slight discount. They were happy to offload a non-performing loan. On a Tuesday afternoon, I became the legal owner of my son's debt. The irony wasn't lost on me. The house Theodore and I had built our life in, that Zephyr had stolen from me, was now mine again, just in a different way. "What's next?" Jameson asked. "Pressure, legal, consistent pressure. I want them to feel what I felt. Powerless, desperate, running out of options." He nodded. I'll handle it. Collection calls, letters, everything by the book, but firm. Thank you, Jameson. As I stood to leave, he said quietly, My grandmother raised me after my parents died. When I was 30, I tried to put her in a nursing home against her will because I wanted her house. She fought me in court and won. I didn't speak to her for 3 years. I waited. She died before we reconciled. I never got to tell her I was sorry. He looked at me. I tell you this because revenge is satisfying, Mrs. Ashbury. But make sure there's room left for something else. Make sure there's a way back. His words stayed with me. While Jameson applied financial pressure, I worked on something else, rebuilding my life. I moved from extended stay to a small apartment in Belltown. Nothing fancy, but mine. I filled it with art supplies, with books, with light. I joined a yoga class at Core Power. The instructor, a young woman named Sarah, noticed me struggling one day. You're fighting your body, she said gently. Stop fighting. Start listening. I started listening. I attended events at the Seattle Art Museum, joined the Pacific Northwest Business Women's Network. I wasn't trying to network in the calculating way Xanthi would. I was just showing up, being present, remembering that I was part of a world bigger than my pain. At one event, I met a gallery owner named Marcus Chen, who looked at my phone photos of rebirth in gray and gold and said, You should show this. Really show it. I'm 66, I said. Nobody wants to see work from someone who's lived, who's survived. Quintessa, that's exactly what people want to see. He handed me his card. Think about it. Dakota called with an update 6 weeks into my new life. I confirmed it, she said. Xanthi isn't pregnant. Not herself, anyway. My hand tightened on the phone. What? She hired a surrogate. Lily Preston, 28, medical student at UW, Lily's, carrying the baby. It's definitely Zephyr's biological child. They used IVF. But Xanthi is faking the pregnancy to everyone, including your son. Why? From what I can piece together, she has severe endometriosis. Doctors gave her less than a 5% chance of carrying to term. But if she told Zephyr that, if she told her father that, she thought she'd lose everything, so she found another way. I sat down, my mind reeling. There's more, Dakota continued. Lily Preston is getting cold feet. She wants more money, an additional $20,000, or she's threatening to tell Zephyr the truth. Xanthi doesn't have it. She's been selling things. Your son's whiskey collection went to a pawn shop last week. The complexity of it hit me. Xanthi wasn't just cruel. She was desperate, terrified, living a lie that was eating her alive. Does Zephyr know any of this? I asked. About the gambling? He thinks he's hiding it. About the surrogate? No idea. He's living in the same house with a wife who's lying about being pregnant with his child. My family, I thought. This was what my family had become. Lies upon lies upon lies. I didn't rush. Good revenge, I'd learned, isn't served hot. It's served at exactly the right temperature. Through my new connections at the Business Women's Network, I quietly, very quietly, made sure that certain construction firms knew about Zephyr's unreliability. Not lies, just facts. He had some personal issues, gambling, I heard. Such a shame. Word spreads fast in professional circles. I didn't blacklist him. I didn't have to. I just let the truth do its work. Meanwhile, I bought something for myself, something I'd been dreaming about. The Penthouse at Summit Tower, 42nd floor, 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle. But what sold me was the 3rd bedroom, perfect size for an art studio. The asking price was $2.1 million. I offered $1.9 million cash. Close in 30 days. The seller accepted within an hour. When I got the keys, I stood on that empty balcony, looking out over the city that had broken me and rebuilt me, and I felt Theodore's presence. I'm doing it, I whispered to the sky. I'm living just like you wanted. The Penthouse wasn't about showing off. It was about reclaiming space, about saying, I deserve beauty, I deserve comfort, I deserve to take up room in this world. I hired a designer, but I was specific. Minimalist Scandinavian style. Cream and gray tones, clean lines. One wall in the studio left completely blank, a canvas waiting. And in the living room, one special piece, rebirth in gray and gold, professionally framed. It took 6 weeks to complete. When it was done, I invited one person to see it. Wayne Patterson, the pharmacist who'd bought me a sandwich when I was at my lowest. He stood in my living room, looking around with tears in his eyes. "You did it," he said simply. "You became her." "Became who?" "The woman you were supposed to be, the one you were living for." 3 months after finding Theodore's letter, I stood on my penthouse balcony and made a call. The phone rang 4 times before Zephyr answered. "Hello?" His voice was strained, exhausted. "Zephyr, it's your mother." Silence. Then, "Mom, where are you calling from?" "I'd like to see you and Xanthi. We need to talk." "Mom, things are really hard right now. If this is about the house, it's not. It's about family, about understanding what happened, about—" I paused. "About giving you both a chance to explain." More silence. I could hear Xanthi's voice in the background. "Who is it?" "I'm at Summit Tower, Penthouse 42B, tomorrow afternoon, 2 p.m. Can you come?" "Summit Tower, the luxury building downtown?" "Yes." "Mom, I don't understand. Tomorrow, Zephyr, 2 p.m. Don't be late." I hung up before he could ask more questions. Then I called Jameson. "They're coming tomorrow. Are you ready?" I looked around my penthouse, at the art on the walls, at the woman reflected in the window glass, strong, certain, whole. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." That night, I cooked mushroom risotto, Theodore's recipe. The one he made every Sunday. The one that meant family, love, home. Tomorrow, Zephyr and Xanthi would walk into my new world and realize that the woman they'd discarded had risen from the ashes they'd left her in. Tomorrow, the reckoning would begin. But tonight I stood on my balcony, looking out over Seattle's glittering lights, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Power. Not power over others. Power over myself. Over my story. Over my life. The woman who'd fainted in a pharmacy was gone. The woman who'd cried in a motel was gone. In their place stood Quintessa Ashbury, artist, survivor, warrior, and she was just getting started. At exactly 1:45 p.m., the front desk called. "Mrs. Ashbury, you have visitors, a Mr. Zephyr Ashbury and Mrs. Xanthi Ashbury." My heart stuttered, but my voice remained steady. "Send them up." I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, my back to the door, watching Seattle stretch out beneath me. I wanted the first thing they saw to be the scale of this view, the distance between where I'd been and where I stood now. I heard the private elevator chime, slow, hesitant footsteps on the marble floor. The doorbell rang. "Come in," I said without turning. "It's unlocked." The door opened. Silence pressed down like a weight. I could feel their shock, their confusion, their disbelief. Let them absorb it. Let them understand. Then I turned. Zephyr stood in the doorway, and my heart broke all over again. He'd aged years in 6 months. Deep circles under his eyes, several days of stubble on his hollow cheeks. His jeans were worn, his shirt wrinkled. This wasn't the confident man who'd handed me eviction papers. This was a shadow of my son. Xanthi stood beside him, one hand on her swollen belly. Her yellow maternity dress looked cheap and faded. Her hair was frizzy, her face drawn. The polished woman who'd mocked me in Whole Foods was gone, replaced by someone brittle and barely holding together. "Hello, Zephyr," I said quietly. "Hello, Xanthi. Welcome to my home." Zephyr's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes moved from the art on the walls to the designer furniture to the panoramic view, like he was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "Mom, what is this?" His voice cracked. This is my life now. I gestured to the Italian leather sofa. Please sit. We have a lot to discuss. They sat like robots, still stunned. Xanthi's eyes darted around the room, calculating, trying to understand. I'd set the table for 3. The mushroom risotto sat in a serving dish, still warm. 3 place settings, 3 crystal glasses. A family, I thought bitterly, or what's left of one. Can I get you something to drink? I asked with careful politeness. I have San Pellegrino, a very nice Malbec from Argentina, or fresh ground coffee from Ethiopia. I named each item deliberately, letting them hear the life I was living now. Water, Xanthi whispered. Water is fine. Zephyr couldn't speak. He was staring at the painting on the wall, rebirth in gray and gold. I brought them water in crystal glasses, then sat in the single chair facing them. The position of power. They were together on the sofa, but I was alone, elevated, in control. All right, I said. You said you wanted to talk. I'm listening. Zephyr cleared his throat, trying to find his composure. Mom first? We're sorry for how we treated you. We were under so much stress. The pregnancy expenses, work pressure, everything just... Stress? I interrupted, my voice soft but sharp as a blade. Is that your reason for throwing your own mother out of her home after 45 years of marriage? It's not a reason. It's just the truth. He looked down. Zephyr. I used the tone I'd once used when he was 5 and had lied about breaking a vase. Don't lie to me. You didn't kick me out because you were stressed. You kicked me out because you thought I was worthless, a burden with nothing left to give. Xanthi finally spoke, her voice cracking. Quintessa, I didn't mean those terrible things I said. I was scared. The baby, the money, everything was falling apart. Which terrible things specifically, Xanthi? I want to hear you say them. Her face went pale. I said you were a burden. That Theodore knew it but didn't have the courage to say it. That our baby needed a stable home, not the complaints of a bitter old woman. Good. At least now you're honest. I stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. In the glass reflection, I could see them, exhausted, desperate, small. You know what's interesting? I said, not turning around. You thought you knew my whole story. You thought you knew exactly who Quintessa Ashbury was. A widow with nothing. A woman past her usefulness. I turned to face them. You were wrong about everything. Mom, please, Zephyr said. Can you just explain? Where did all this come from? I walked to my chair, but didn't sit. Not so fast. I have questions first, and I want honest answers. I looked at Zephyr. Do you still draw? The question clearly caught him off guard. No. I don't have time. Or you don't have the soul for it anymore. He flinched. Your father kept every drawing you ever made. From age 5 to 18, 87 pieces. Did you know that? Zephyr's eyes filled with tears. He showed them to me a month before he died. He said, our boy sees the world differently. He finds beauty in ordinary things. Never let him lose that. So tell me, Zephyr, what happened? When did the boy who drew dreams become the man who throws his mother away? Mom, I'm so sorry. Answer the question. He broke down. I don't know when I became this person. I look at myself and I don't recognize who I see. The anguish in his voice was real. Part of me, the mother part, wanted to comfort him, but I stayed where I was. Let me tell you a story, I said, beginning to pace. 2 years ago, when your father died, I was exactly the woman you thought I was. A widow with no resources, dependent on family, vulnerable and alone. I stopped in front of them. But when you betrayed me, when you threw me out like garbage, something changed. I had to learn to be a different kind of woman. One who didn't need anyone's permission to exist. I moved to stand by my painting, and then I discovered something. Your father, the man I loved for 45 years, had protected me in ways I never knew. He invested, he bought land, he planned for my future without telling me. Zephyr's head snapped up. Dad had money saved? Your father left me a fortune, Zephyr. A fortune that now belongs to me. And only me. Xanthi's face went white. How much? I smiled without warmth. Enough to buy this building. Enough to buy the entire block you live on. And enough to send your child to any university in the world. Or to make sure they never see a cent from me. The implications hung in the air like smoke. I also have something else, I continued. Connections, information, power. I looked directly at Zephyr. I know about the gambling, son. I know about the $85,000 you owe to Gerald Murphy. I know about the mortgage payments you've missed. His face crumbled. I turned to Xanthi. And I know about you too. I walked to my desk and picked up an envelope. Inside was a photograph. This is Lily Preston, I said, placing the photo on the coffee table between us. 28 years old, medical student at the University of Washington. Xanthi went rigid. She's a lovely young woman, very brave, actually, to help a couple who can't have children on their own. Zephyr looked at the photo, confused. Who is this? That's what I'd like to know, I said, my eyes never leaving Xanthi's face. Xanthi, would you like to tell your husband who Lily Preston is, or should I? Quintessa, please. Xanthi's voice was barely a whisper. Tell me what? Zephyr looked between us, panic rising in his voice. What is going on? I sat down, looked at my son, and spoke with careful precision. Xanthi isn't pregnant, Zephyr. Lily Preston is. The words landed like a bomb. What? Zephyr turned to his wife, his face a mask of confusion and betrayal. What is she talking about? Xanthi was shaking, tears streaming down her face. I can explain. Then explain. Zephyr was on his feet now, his voice breaking. Is this true? She looked down at her belly, the padding, the lies, the deception, and something inside her finally broke. Yes, she whispered. It's true. The room went silent except for Xanthi's quiet sobbing. I have endometriosis, she said, the words tumbling out now. Severe. The doctor said I had less than a 5% chance of carrying a baby to term, but I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell my father. If I did, I'd lose everything. You'd leave me. My parents would never accept this grandchild, so I found another way. Another way? Zephyr's voice was hollow. You mean you lied? For 8 months? To protect us? To give us a family? By faking a pregnancy? By making me believe? He couldn't finish. He turned away, his hands in his hair, his whole body shaking. He looked at me, his eyes desperate. Did you know? This whole time? I found out 2 weeks ago, I said quietly. I hired a private investigator to learn the truth about what my family had become. Your family? Zephyr laughed bitterly. We're not a family. We're strangers living in the same nightmare. Zephyr collapsed back onto the sofa, his head in his hands. For a long moment, he just breathed. Then he said something that changed everything. I knew. I leaned forward. Knew what? He looked up at me, his face destroyed. About the land, about Dad's investment, I knew. The world tilted. What are you saying? 6 months before we kicked you out, I was going through Dad's old files, looking for our birth certificates for something. I found papers, deeds, maps. I saw what he'd bought. I looked it up. I saw what it was worth. My hand went to my chest. You knew I would be wealthy? I knew you'd figure it out eventually, that you'd need to sell the land, deal with the paperwork. And I thought, he was crying now, really crying. I thought if I took the house, you'd be forced to handle the estate. Then I'd come back, apologize, and you'd forgive me. You always forgave me, Mom. Always. So you calculated my pain, I said, my voice shaking. You knew I'd be okay financially, so you decided my emotional suffering didn't matter? I told myself you'd be fine. That you were strong, that I was strong enough to be abandoned. The anger in my voice could have cut glass. That I was strong enough to live in a motel, to go hungry, to be humiliated by your wife in public while you knew I had the means to survive? I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. I'm the worst son in the world. I stood up, walked to the window, and had to steady myself against the glass. All of it, Every moment of suffering had been calculated. He'd bet on my strength, bet on my love, bet that I would take the pain and eventually forgive him. He'd gambled with his mother the same way he gambled with cards. I stood there for a long time, looking out at Seattle, trying to find my breath, my center, my humanity. Behind me, they waited in silence. When I finally turned around, my face was wet with tears I hadn't realized I'd shed. I prepared 7 conditions, I said quietly, things you'd have to do to earn my help. But now, I walked to my desk and picked up a folder. Inside were documents Jameson had prepared. Now I only have 3. I sat down facing them, the folder in my lap. Condition 1, the house in Queen Anne. I've already bought the mortgage through an LLC. I own your debt now, Zephyr, all $18,800 of the back payments, plus the remaining balance. They both went pale. I'm going to pay it off, all of it. The house will be placed in a trust for your child. You can live there, mortgage-free, until the baby turns 18. After that, they decide what happens to it. Mom, you don't have to. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for my grandchild, an innocent child who did nothing to deserve parents who lie to each other. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. Condition 2, Zephyr, you will enter a gambling addiction treatment program. Seattle Counseling Service at Selrer has a 12-step program specifically for gambling. I've already registered you and paid for 2 years. You start next Monday. Okay, he whispered. Okay. If you miss more than 2 sessions, or if you gamble again, you lose the house immediately. No second chances. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I turned to Xanthi. Condition 3. You will attend individual therapy, not couples counseling. You need to figure out why you treat people like chess pieces, why you think lying is the same as protecting. Xanthi was sobbing into her hands now. I'll also pay Lily Preston the additional $20,000 she's asking for. And I'll help you with the adoption paperwork so that legally you'll both be this baby's parents. Why? Xanthi looked up, her face blotchy and broken. Why would you do that for me after everything? Because I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for the baby. And maybe, I paused, choosing my words carefully, maybe because I understand what it's like to be desperate, to be so afraid of losing everything that you make terrible choices. And in exchange, I said, standing up, I want one thing from both of you. Anything, Zephyr said. Anything, Mom. Honesty. Complete, absolute honesty. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more secrets. I walked toward them slowly. If you need help, you ask. If you're scared, you say it. If you're angry, you express it. But you never, never lie to me again. I stopped in front of them. Because I'm giving you this chance, this one chance. But if you betray me again, if you lie again, if you treat me like I'm disposable again, my voice hardened, I will walk away, and this time there will be no coming back. We understand, they both said. I don't think you do. I sat on the coffee table directly in front of them, forcing them to meet my eyes. You destroyed something sacred, the trust between a mother and child, the foundation of family. I'm offering to rebuild it, but it won't be the same. It will never be the same. We know, Zephyr said, his voice breaking. We know what we did. Then prove it, not with words, with actions. Show me, show yourselves that you can be better than you've been. The call came at 2:17 a.m. Mom? Zephyr's voice was shaking. It's time. Lily's in labor. I was dressed and out the door in 10 minutes. Seattle Children's Hospital was quiet at this hour. I found them in the waiting room, Zephyr pacing, Xanthi sitting with her hands clasped tight, the fake belly long gone, replaced by the truth. When they saw me, relief washed over both their faces. Thank you for coming, Xanthi said softly. I said I would be here. We waited together. Zephyr was 53 days sober. I knew because he showed me his chip at our last monthly dinner. Xanthi was in therapy, slowly learning to be honest about her fears instead of burying them in lies. They weren't perfect. We weren't healed, but we were trying. At 4:32 a.m., a nurse came out with a smile. It's a boy, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Everyone's healthy. We were allowed in one at a time. When Zephyr came out of Lily's room, he was crying and holding a bundle of blue blankets. "Mom," he said, walking toward me, "meet your grandson." He placed the baby in my arms. I looked down at this tiny, perfect face. My Theodore's legacy, my son's second chance, and felt something I'd thought was lost forever. Hope. "Hello, little one," I whispered. "I'm your grandmother, and I promise you something. I'll teach you what your great-grandfather taught me. That family isn't just blood, it's honesty. It's showing up, it's choosing each other every day, even when it's hard." The baby yawned. Behind me, Xanthi whispered to Zephyr, "What are we naming him?" Zephyr looked at me, his eyes asking permission. "Theodore," he said. "We're naming him Theodore, after the man who taught us what strength really means." "Theo for short," I said, smiling through tears. "Your great-grandfather would be proud." The gallery opening was small, only 50 people, but it meant everything. Ashbury Arts read the sign above the door. My gallery, my dream, my life. Inside hung 3 generations of art. Theodore's architectural sketches from the 1970s, my paintings from the past year, and in the center, something new, Zephyr's first drawings in a decade, cityscapes, portraits, art that showed a man learning to see beauty again. The centerpiece was a triptych we'd created together, broken, rebuilding, and whole. Wayne Patterson stood in front of it for a long time. "This tells your story," he said. "Our story," I corrected. "All of us, everyone who falls and learns to rise." Harriet Donovan, from the community center that had rejected me, approached with an embarrassed smile. "Quintessa, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you. Would you consider teaching at our center? We'd be honored." "I'd love to," I said. And I meant it. Across the room, Xanthi held baby Theo, standing in front of a painting I'd titled "The Warrior Grandmother." She whispered something to the baby, kissed his head, then looked at me with tears in her eyes. She mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." I nodded. We weren't friends. We might never be. But we were something. Family members learning to coexist with honesty instead of pretense. Zephyr found me as the evening was winding down. "Mom, can I show you something?" He led me to a small drawing in the corner. It was a sketch of our family, him, Xanthi, baby Theo, and me. We were all connected by a golden thread, but the thread was frayed in places, knotted in others, imperfect but holding. "It's called Redemption is Messy," he said quietly. "Because it is. We're messy, but we're trying." "Yes," I said, taking his hand. "We are." That night, I returned to my penthouse alone. I poured a glass of wine and stood on my balcony, looking out over the city that had broken me and rebuilt me into something stronger. In my pocket was one final letter from Theodore I'd found that morning, tucked into the USB drive's case. Dated the day before he died. I opened it with shaking hands. "My dearest Quintessa, if you're reading this, you've survived something hard. I don't know what, but I know you. You're reading this standing tall, not broken. That's who you are. The woman who falls 7 times and stands 8. The woman who taught our son that strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'm always with you." P.S. There's one more thing in box number 1247, a key to a small studio space at Pike Place Market. I rented it for 50 years, prepaid. It's yours. Paint, my love. Paint the life you deserve. I smiled through tears, raised my glass to the stars. I am Theodore. I finally am. Below me, Seattle glittered like a promise. Behind me, in my studio, a blank canvas waited. Tomorrow, I would paint. Tomorrow, I would teach young artists at Harriet's Center. Tomorrow, I would have dinner with my broken, healing family. But tonight, I stood alone on my balcony, whole and free, finally understanding what Theodore had known all along. I was never the burden they made me feel like. I was the warrior I'd always been. I just needed to remember. The end. Family isn't about perfection. It's about honesty, boundaries, and the courage to rebuild. Sometimes the people who break us give us the chance to become who we were always meant to be. Quintessa Ashbury learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise, and she rose like a phoenix from ashes. Not for revenge, but for herself. What would you do if the people you loved most betrayed you? Would you find the strength to forgive? And more importantly, would you find the strength to never forget your own worth? Share this story with someone who needs to remember. You are not a burden. You are a warrior.